Hello everybody. In the current affairs this week, the week ended 10th of August 2025. This week marks the 100th episode of my weekly video on current affairs. With the grace of God, I have not missed any video in last 100 weeks. The news scene this week was dominated by draconian tariff on Indian goods by the US to the extent of 50%. This is the highest level of tariff which is placed by US on any country, and one another country which is facing this kind of 50% tariff is Brazil. Initially, the tariff was aimed at countries like China. China in those days when the tariff was started or tariff war was started by the US, it was imposed to the extent of 145% on Chinese goods. But US fast understood that this kind of tariff is unsustainable for their economy when it comes to the Chinese goods. So they moderated the tariffs on Chinese goods to the extent of just 30%. These sectors in India which would rather not get impacted on these kinds of tariffs are the first being the pharmaceutical sector, where a lot of bulk drugs and APIs are exported by India to the US, and that would impact the health cost in the US. Electronic hardware, where there is a lot of manufacturing which is happening for companies like Apple and Samsung, are out of the ambit of these tariffs. IT and digital services, they being services, they are out of the ambit of tariffs which is on goods. Energy products like petroleum products are also not within the ambit of this tariff. The sectors which are impacted the most, the first being textile and apparel. US accounts for 27% of India's total exports of textile and apparel, and that is to the tune of 40,000 crores. The countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam and Mexico are obvious gainers out of the high rates of tariffs on India. The other sector which would be impacted would be gems and jewelry. 14% of India's total exports on gems and jewelry are to the US, and the countries like Hong Kong, Thailand and Turkey would benefit out of it. Leather and non-leather exports to the US from India are to the tune of $5 billion US, and countries like Vietnam and Indonesia are going to benefit out of it. Engineering goods and auto components is a sector which will also get impacted on account of these high rates of tariff. Seafood exports to the US accounts for 40% of the total exports by India to any country, and this is going to impact India significantly. Ecuador and Vietnam are the countries which are going to gain out of it. Net, the impact of these tariffs on the Indian economy is estimated by different financial institutions and rating agencies to the extent of 0.3% of drop of GDP to drop of GDP as high as 1.1%. In an economy which is growing at around 6.5%, a drop of this extent in its GDP growth is significant, and it could impact several sectors as we discussed, which are more labor intensive in nature, and that could have an impact on the economy. But we have always seen that a new India has always emerged out of adversities. and I'm quite hopeful that it's going to be the same this time as well. The consensus view across everybody who is watching this entire exercise of tariffs by the US is clear that this is not the end of the road. Lot of things are going to get unfolded in the days to come, and these tariffs of 50% are absolutely unsustainable, and that will bring the entire trade between India and the US to a grinding halt. This really had an impact on the Indian stock market. The Nifty 50 was down by 0.81%, Nifty mid cap was down by 1.13%, and Nifty small cap was down by 1.84%. The FIS continue to be sellers in the Indian market to the extent of 10,600 crores. DIIs continue to be buyers in the Indian market and quite aggressively to the extent of 33,800 crores. On the international commodity front, crude was down by around 4.5%, and India gold appreciated by 2.74% and silver appreciated by 4.64%. The US stock markets, Nasdaq was up by 3.88% and S&P 500 was up by 2.44%. The 10-year and the 30-year GSEC yield are on a rise in the US. In last 1 year, the 10-year GSEC in the US has risen from 3.99 to 4.28, and the 30-year GSEC has risen from 4.28 to 4.85. This is a slow and steady rise in the 10-year GSEC yields, which indicates that there is a slowly and steadily a lesser demand and lesser trust in the US government security. That is all for this week. Thank you.